In this lesson, I'm going to talk about Python strings, what they are, what do they do, how do we use them within the Python language. The Python shell on the left already open. Now recall from previous lessons, the shell executes one command at a time. If I need to write a program, then I need to open up by going on File, New File, and then it opens up the shell again where I can actually type the program itself, and then click once to run and it will run the program. Okay, so just quick recap from last time. So I'm going to close this for now. So strings are amongst the most popular types in Python. We use them all the time. Whenever you're writing code, you're creating a program, you're bound to use strings. We can create them simply by enclosing characters in quotes. So for example, you can use single quotes or double quotes. A string can have any number of characters in it, including 0. The empty string is enclosed in 2 quotes with nothing between them. And quotes can turn digits into strings as well. And if you were to use the backslash on your keyboard, that can be used to escape quotes. So let's take a look at how actually Python uses these quotations when we talk about Python strings. Okay, so I'm going to click on the Python shell here. And if I were to just, as an example, type something, let's say I'm going to say New York, Python does not understand the word. In other words, Python wants us to tell or provide an instruction. Simply writing text is not really an instruction unless we place the text within the quotation marks. Only then Python would know, hey, wait a minute here, this is now a text, and it's going to treat anything between the quotations as text. So for instance, if I were to type the same thing within a single quote, and notice Python automatically colors this as green, and hit the enter key on the keyboard, and it displays the word as a string. What happens if I use double quotes? New York in double quotes, it will return the value similar to whether I use the single quotes or double quotes. A string can also have a number of characters in it, including 0. So for example, if I were to type the number 5 within a single quote or a double quote, doesn't really make any difference, hit enter. Now this 5 is not a number. It's considered as a text. Okay, so it's confusing at times, but when you get used to the strings or using the quotations, you would automatically know that we're talking about text. We're not talking about numbers. If I were to write just number 5, hit the enter key, now that's a number. So Python knows that this is a number. And let me demonstrate this further. So if I go 5 plus 4, hit the enter key, it's 9. What happens when I use quotations? So for example, if I use the quotations, I say 5, and then I add 4 to it. Okay, let me try that again. 5 plus 4. And at this point, if I hit enter, Python is going to recognize both of these as strings, and it's going to join and says 5, 4. From the look of it, you may say it's 54, but in essence, this is just a string. So keep that in mind. So the strings can also include digits. The empty string is 2 quotes with nothing between them. And you can use the backslash to escape those quotes. And we'll take a look at next as to how to use the backslash as well. But for right now, I just wanted to demonstrate quickly the basic concept of what a string is. Okay, here are certain examples that you can also practice yourself. But quickly, if I were to go back to my shell and type something like play football, if I can spell this correctly, play football, right? And it simply displays the same. Next, let me clear the screen, so I'll open up the shell again so that you can see when we use the backslash within Python strings. Okay, the use of backslash is fairly straightforward in Python. For example, if I were to use the word doesn't within my single quotation, just as a plain English word, and hit the enter key, notice it gives me the syntax error, where it says, well, wait a minute here, these quotations within the word doesn't, or right after the letter N, Python sees this and tries to figure it out that this is a string, but in essence we're just typing English language. So to tell Python to escape or don't worry about this particular quotation mark after the letter N, we use the backslash, and that's the basic concept behind the backslash. So now, for example, the same word doesn't, and right after the word N, I'm going to use backslash. Try again, and I'm going to use backslash this time, and then my quotations, right? Hit the enter key, and now it writes as doesn't. Okay, so similarly, you can use either single quotes or double quotes. Doesn't really make any difference. If you're quoting another person, for example, then you would use something like, hello, my name is John, and I want to use it as a coded text from someone. So here we go. Hello, my name is John, and right after John, I'm going to say backslash, and then how are you? Okay, run this, hit enter key, and notice at this point the words hello, my name is John are in double quotes because I'm coding someone, and then whatever you want to write. So it's a good way to work with the backslash, and it's pretty common. Once you take a look at the Python code, for instance, you will see this quite a bit. So if you don't want characters prefaced by a backslash to be interpreted as special characters, what we do is we use the letter R before the first quote. So for instance, let me demonstrate this. If we were to say something like print, open the parentheses, C colon, wonderful New York. Now in this instance, if I hit enter, notice it gives me an invalid syntax. Why? Because obviously I forgot the strings. So I need to make sure that I add strings. So I'm going to quickly copy this again and paste it. Go to my C and add my strings, and of course automatically it changes the color. Tells me that now I'm on the right track. Hit enter, and notice what happens. Python truncates after the letter L. So it says wonderful, and then the backslash N, it treats it as a new line, so it completely forgets about the letter N. So this could be problematic if you're writing something and then you're trying to figure it out. Okay, well, what happens? Where did my letter go? So in order to make sure that you have a letter, what we can do is we can use raw strings by simply adding an R, which would allow Python to skip the backslash N. Okay, so again, one more time, I can do something like print, my quotation, C colon, backslash, wonderful New York, and I'm not done yet because I need to place the R, which is the raw string, right before when I open this string. So Python now knows that if I use the slash N in this instance before the word New York or new, it's not going to truncate. So if I hit enter, now it's going to display the entire word for me. Okay, so practice with these strings. They're pretty powerful and used frequently in Python. Next is string concatenation. So the plus operation, or the plus sign on the keyboard, or the addition sign, means concatenate the strings. Python looks at the type of operands before deciding what operation is associated with the plus sign. In other words, string can be glued together with the plus operator, and then you can repeat them with the asterisk or the multiplication sign. So for instance, if I were to have strings such as new, if I were to just hit enter, obviously it's going to type the string. But if I do something like new as one string and then York as the other one, is going to type New York. Okay, and we've done this before. Okay, so simply taking two strings and then combining them, and these are fairly common when you talk about first name and last name. Okay, so these are common. So if you want to combine first name and last name into one single string, you would use the plus sign. The multiplication sign or the asterisk is simply multiplying the same word. So I can say something like 4 asterisk or multiply, and the word new. Hit enter, and it's going to simply recognize that what I would like to do is write the word new 4 times. So Python writes this word 4 times. Here are a couple of other examples, string concatenation examples, but you get the idea as to how to join 2 words. You can concatenate 1 word, 2 words. So I can say something like, for example, 7 times new plus 4 times York. Okay, hit enter. And what Python does is write 7 times new and then 4 times York. So it depends on your own requirement, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, but just to give you an idea of string concatenation and provide several examples. Okay, next, let's talk about string formatting. Strings can be indexed, superscripted, with the first character having index 0. And this essentially means that the way Python recognizes these words, for example, let's take the word New York here, okay? Any word. What Python does, it assigns numbers to these words, right? Binary digits, for example. So it'll say something like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 0 essentially is the letter N, 1 is the letter E, 2 is the letter W, and so on. And there's no specific or separate character type. A character is simply the string of size 1. So for example, if I say something like word equals Python. So I'm assigning, this is an assignment statement recall from our previous lesson. So I'm assigning Python as a word, or word equals Python. Now if I were to say something like word and then use my brackets and say 3, for instance, hit enter, is going to display H, which is in fact the 4th letter within the word Python. But recall and keep that in mind always, that the letter P is always 0. So Python starts with 0. So it's going to say 0, 1, 2, 3, which is the word H. So the H in this word Python, according to Python language, is at number 3. Similarly, let's say word 5. You guessed it, it's the letter N, or the last letter within this word. So just keep that in mind, that strings can be indexed with the first character having the index 0. On the other hand, we can use negative indices also. For example, strings can be indexed with the first character having 0, and you can run it backwards as well. So for example, within the same word, which I've already have it assigned up on top here, I can say something like word brackets -1. It's going to say N. Similarly, word brackets -2. It's going to display O. So in this instance, it's counting from right to left. So right to left. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Notice the difference here. If I say something like word -6, it gives me the letter P, which is my first word. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So you can either tell Python to index backwards or forward. You can use both values. It just depends on your own self. The triple quotes, powerful feature in Python. Python's triple quotes comes to the rescue by allowing strings to span multiple lines. For instance, if you were writing a paragraph, or you're telling a story, or you have multiple lines of text, we can use triple quotes. And the syntax for triple quotes consists of 3 consecutive single or double quotes. So for example, within my Python shell, if I say 3 quotes, this would imply now Python recognizes the 3 consecutive single quotes or double quotes as spanning to multiple lines. And end of lines automatically included in the string. But it's possible to prevent this by adding the backslash at the end of the line. So I can say 3 single quotes. This is a new story of Python language. Hit enter. Notice I'm able to now enter a new line, and I can continue on with my story. My name is John, and I love Python programming. And I can continue on until I finish my story. So as soon as I start, the idea here is that as soon as I start with the 3 quotations, whether single or double quotes, Python knows that now I need multiple lines of text within the string. Okay, so let me next clear the shell before I move to my next slide here. Okay, let's do the quick example of the 3 quotations. So for example, I can say something like print, and notice I am leaving a single space in between, even though within my example here on the slide there is no space after the word print, but when I'm in my shell, notice there's a space that I leave. Okay, Python recognizes as no big deal whether I leave a space or if I start my parentheses right after the word print, so it doesn't really make any difference. So print, use the backslash. I'm going to New York next week to study. Enter a new line, and I can say something like chapter 1 of my studies, and I just tabbed, by the way. Python is great. Chapter 2, Python is awesome. Okay. And I can tab and keep writing as I go along. Once I'm done, I can simply use the 3 quotes again, close my parentheses, and automatically Python highlights the whole thing as, okay, it's done, recognizes this as a multiple lines text, and now it's going to print it. So it's going to say, I'm going to New York next week to study. Here's my text. So a powerful way of embedding this option within your code so that it's easier to write as you're writing the code in Python. Great. So in conclusion, we took a look at concept of strings, concatenation of strings, using numbers as strings, and identifying or understanding the concept of index. For example, the word Python, you can use these as indices and assign, and Python automatically assigns the first letter as is 0. And we also took a look at the letter R, where, for example, \n is to enter a new line. To avoid or to tell Python to skip over entering a new line, we use the letter R. And finally, the 3 quotations, whether single or double, if you need to use multiple lines within Python. So practice using strings, very important. We'll use this off and on almost all the time within our code. And let's move to our next lesson.